Thank you for tuning in to TG Talk. My name is Sailor Schwab, and I am SAE's Assistant Director of Communications. The SAE Foundation is back with another great interview with Gary Powers Jr., author, historian, and speaker. Foundation CEO Steve Mitchell spoke with Gary about his father, Francis Gary Powers, a U-2 pilot for the CIA who was shot down over the former Soviet Union in 1960. This episode is a lesson in history and also focuses on Gary's own unique journey and experiences. I hope that you enjoy it.
Come sing to Sigma Alpha Epsilon, Epsilon, Sigma Alpha Epsilon, Sigma Alpha, 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 Sigma Alpha Epsilon, Sigma Alpha, 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 Sigma Alpha.
Well, good morning, Gary. How are you?
I'm fine, Steve. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Most people, when they hear the expression U2, they think of a musical band, a rock group, and they don't take into account that it actually came from a real event in plane. And you, Gary Powers, can tell us about that in a lot more detail today. Do you mind sharing some of your background and history?
Oh, sure. I'd be glad to. Thank you. Bono from U2, from what I understand through an article that was released a bunch of years ago, took the name from the U2 spy plane and or the U2 incident in which my father was shot down over the former Soviet Union on May 1st of 1960. He was captured, interrogated, put on trial, sentenced to 10 years in prison, then exchanged 2 years later for a Soviet spy at the Glennecker Bridge in Potsdam, Germany.
Wow. So a lot of people may not be familiar with all the details. And when we spoke a little bit earlier, you indicated you had a slideshow, and perhaps you could walk us through that and just help people get a little bit more steeped in terms of what actually happened.
Well, sure. This is a very brief slideshow. It will talk about the U2 incident as well as the movie that Steven Spielberg directed back in 2015 called Bridge of Spies. So this will give a very good overview for the audience as to what my father went through and the topic of discussion today. So what we have on the screen here is a U2 spy plane. It's an artist's rendition. They fly at 70,000 to 75,000 feet above the Earth's surface. From the cockpit, you can see the curvature of the Earth. You can see beautiful, beautiful scenery when there's a nice clear day. And all the while, the cameras in the belly of the airplane are taking photographs of foreign hostile countries to find out their strengths and weaknesses. So my father was recruited from the US Air Force in 1956. He was a U-2 pilot for the CIA between 1956 and 1960. That's when he gets shot down over the former Soviet Union.
And from what I read from your book, it's really difficult to fly the plane in that too fast, and it gets a little squirrely. Too slow is the same thing. And so it took a lot of time in order to develop the skills to fly it properly.
That is correct. The movie came out in 2015 called Bridge of Spies. It was directed by Steven Spielberg. It stars Tom Hanks as James Donovan. James Donovan is the attorney who represented the Soviet spy Rudolf Abel after his capture in the mid-50s. He's the attorney who brokered the exchange between my dad and the Soviet spy back in 1962. So my father was exchanged for Colonel Rudolf Abel. Abel was a master spy, a KGB colonel. He was infiltrated into America. He set up shop in New York City. He ran a spy ring, collecting microfilm, microfiche, sensitive US secrets, then sending them home to Mother Russia. Here's an image of my father. As a result of being shot down over the Soviet Union on May 1st of 60, he made the cover of Time magazine in May of 1960. The exchange of my father for Rudolf Abel took place at the Glennecker Bridge in Potsdam, Germany. It separates East and West. On the right side of this photo, you can see a very famous sign, "You are leaving the American sector," in different languages. When you cross that bridge, you'll be in East Germany, in communist country. Another photo of the bridge. This was taken on February 10th, 1962, the date of the spy exchange. In Google, it says it is the spy exchange. It is not. You cannot believe everything you read online or see online. This photo was taken in the afternoon after the news broke that the spy exchange had taken place. So the spy exchange took place at 9 in the morning, cold, dark, foggy morning, right out of a John Le Carré novel. Each spy on each side of the bridge are positively ID'd. They walk home to their respective freedoms. So here's a political cartoon of the time. Abel on one side, surrounded by the FBI and the CIA. My father on the other side, surrounded by the KGB. Again, they're positively ID'd. They walk home to their respective freedoms. What you don't see on this, at the bottom, the tagline says, peace through trade. It's a little humor about trading goods, trading automobiles, commerce versus trading of spies. So a little political humor of the time. When Rudolf Abel returned home to the Soviet Union, he was welcomed home as a hero to their country, a parade in his honor, a postage stamp in his likeness. When my father returned home, there was a lot of controversy that surrounded him. While he was in prison, there were editorials written, newspaper articles written saying that he defected, he landed the plane intact, he spilled his guts and told the Soviets everything he knew, or that he hadn't followed orders, all of which were mistruths, untruths, fake news of the time. The movie Bridge of Spies is based off of 2 books. My dad's autobiography, Operation Overflight, that he wrote in 1970 with the information he had available. 1970, things are still classified. He could not put everything in the book he wanted to, but he was able to get it out for public consumption. The other book, Strangers on a Bridge, written by James Donovan. James Donovan is the attorney portrayed by Tom Hanks in the movie. Donovan writes this book in 1965. He passes away in 1970 of a heart attack in New York City. I was fortunate to be a consultant on the Steven Spielberg film, Bridge of Spies. Here I am on set in New York City, talking to Austin Stoll. I am showing him some family photos from the 1950s. So Austin Stoll, a young actor, portrayed my father in the film. It was an honor and a privilege to be on set, to work with Mr. Spielberg, Mr. Hanks, the staff, the crew, get to talk with Austin Stoll so that he is aware of my father, what he went through, and what happened to him after he was shot down. Here's another photo of us talking together. I've just explained to Mr. Spielberg about how my father was shot down. He's repeating it back to me. He's probably getting some ideas for that film scene in the movie. As an added bonus, they said, hey, Mr. Powers, put on this 1950s vintage suit. We're going to have you escort the pilot out to the May 1st mission. So here I am at Beale Air Force Base in Southern California, right near Sacramento. It's the home of the U-2 program. This is an actual U-2 spy plane in the background. They're still being used today. Talking to another of the directors, not the directors, one of the producers, in the hangar at Beale Air Force Base with the U-2 in the background. One of the scenes in the hangar, the pilots on the right side of the screen are being briefed. I'm the quote unquote secret agent man on the left side in the suit. And then here's the scene where I'm escorting my dad out for the May 1st mission. Very surreal at the time. I didn't really understand what was happening until it was over. And it's like, wow, I just walked my dad out. That was really bizarre. I did some promotion and marketing for the film with Austin Stoll, talking about our experiences on set. In the background is one of the U-2s that is currently in operation around the world. I took this photo with my cell phone. At the end of the film, when the last scene is shot and it's a wrap, it's about to go to the editing floor or the editors in Hollywood to edit the scenes. It's a big tradition to wheel out a cake, lots of champagne. Spielberg goes around toasting everybody, thanking them for their participation. He turns to me, he thanks me for being a consultant, he raises his glass and toasts Dad as a hero to our country. Click. That's when I took that photo. Wow. Here is marketing for the film, History versus Hollywood. fact versus fiction. On the left side of the screen, you've got my father. This is a photograph that was released by the KGB, by the Soviet Union, to show that he was alive and well in captivity. You can tell by this photo, he is not happy. He knows it's going to be used for propaganda reasons. On the right side, the young actor, Austin Stoll, in the same type of helmet, a photograph of what it would look like of him in the cockpit of the U-2, similar makeup, similar, what do you call it, the clothing that my father would be wearing, basically a compare and contrast. The last image here is of my father in front of an F-84. He was an F-84 pilot between 1952 and 1956 before being recruited by the CIA to fly the U-2s on the reconnaissance missions. On the right side, they're trying to recreate that photograph with Austin Stoll, the actor, in front of the U-2 spy plane. So that's just a really quick overview of the movie, a little bit about my father and what he went through back in the 1960s with the U-2 incident.
That's amazing. So what's interesting to me is, given our recent experience with a weather balloon that crossed the United States, wasn't your father's cover that he was doing weather research with the CIA?
Yes, that is correct. Let me open this up again and I can show you. Okay, so the Chinese weather balloon basically came over our country a few weeks ago. Immediately upon being discovered and acknowledging it as a Chinese balloon, the Chinese government put out a cover story that it was a weather research balloon. So here's a photo taken from a U-2. The pilot did a selfie in the cockpit with the shadow of the U-2 on the balloon. Technically, he should not have had his cell phone in the cockpit. He should not be taking pictures that are not authorized. So I'm pretty sure that the US government, the US Air Force said, hey, take as many pictures as you can from inside the cockpit. If we find one that's really good, we can use it to promote the fact that we are safeguarding our citizens. We are on top of the situation. We are monitoring the balloon's activities, the flight path, and finding out where it's going. The articles that were written the last few weeks, nowhere did I ever read this, but I'm sure it happened. Not only was the U-2 flying around the balloon and surveying it and taking photos of it, but I'm sure that the equipment on board the U-2 had some type of a jamming equipment to prevent the signals from the balloon being transmitted back to China, to prevent them from getting the information that it was taking in. I am positive that we were trying to do that to prevent the release of the information. Nowhere have I read this. It's just from my background, my knowledge base of espionage and the U-2 program and what we do, it makes sense.
It's interesting. So at what point did the U-2 engage with the balloon? Early on in the flight, or?
Well, from what I understand, it started to engage when it came over Montana. I don't think it engaged while it was over Alaska coming into Canadian airspace. I think it was monitored from Montana down to South Carolina, where it was ultimately shot down off the coast, F-22 Raptor shooting a Stinger missile.
Wow.
So let me get back out of this and back to you. There we go.
So you indicated your father took off or was shot down in May and released in February, so nearly 2 years in captivity. Did you ever get an opportunity to talk to him about what it was like and the experience that he had?
Well, yes, I did. I was born and grew up in Southern California. I was born June 5th of 1965. Dad had been shot down in 60, exchanged in 62, met my mother at the CIA headquarters back when he came home, romance ensued. So when I'm growing up, I'm aware that my father was shot down, imprisoned, exchanged. I thought it was normal. I thought everybody's dad went through this. But then he dies August 1st, 1977, in a helicopter crash while working for NBC television out of Los Angeles. I am 12 years old at the time, house full of people inform us of the bad news. My life is turned upside down. I'm very introverted through high school, start doing research in college. Now, in regards to your specific question about me and my dad talking, yes, we did talk about the U-2 incident. He explained to me what had happened, but I'm a kid. I'm asking kid questions. I'm not interested in what he went through. I want to go play. He passes away, and it's too late to ask him any more questions. So I had to learn about him through family, through research, through declassified files, from talking to some of his contemporaries who flew with him or worked with him during that time period.
So you indicated you were a little bit of an introvert through high school, and then you go to college and you join a fraternity, SAE.
Yes, I do.
What did SAE mean to you, and what did you learn from it?
Well, at the time, I am 17. I'm 18 years old. I'm a freshman, entering freshman at Cal State Northridge. I end up going to some fraternity parties, clicking with the SAE group, and it really changed my life. I was very shy, very introverted. I didn't want to talk to people because I didn't know the truth of what took place with my dad. So I never wanted to have those conversations. Once I joined the fraternity, and I found out that, wow, there's a whole different side of college, which is a lot of fun. That opened up some doors. It opened up some different opinions. So then I ended up pledging, going through pledging. After 4 years, I become the EA for the chapter. And I helped with my fellow brothers who were recruiting in at the time, to go from a house that was not as well organized to one that was a leader on campus. And so we were able to instill in future pledges and future brothers the need to do community service, study, make sure that you stay on top of things and help each other out. Now, behind the scenes, I'm still having a really good time. After EA, in I think 87, I fail out of college. I'm not upset at that. I'm not unproud of that. It's part of my life experience. I learned from it. I learned more in the fraternity than I did in college on how to deal with people, work with people, the diversity, a double secret probation, having to deal with administrators, coming out, how to deal with women. I mean, I was really shy coming into college, and my fraternity helped to bring me out of my shell and helped to make me the man I am today. I learned so much from my fellow brothers, leadership abilities, speaking abilities, being able to deal with putting out fires that happen. When something goes wrong, you have to work really fast to make sure it gets back in order. So I learned a lot of real hands-on experience doing fraternity, rising up through its ranks to be its president, than I did in college. Now, I did end up going back to college and graduating. And now after I'm 57 years old, so after 40 years, I have 2 master's degrees. So for anybody listening, if they're struggling with their grades, they're having some problems, if you need to take a semester off, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. It just means that you're taking a different path.
It's interesting you say that, Gary, because we've interviewed quite a few people at this point, and I haven't found anyone that has the exact same path. And that doesn't mean you can't be successful. And it's interesting too that you said that the fraternity brought out some of these leadership skills in you, because I would tell anyone that were to ask me, is I learned more about how to be a leader in the SAE house at Indiana Gamma than I did, any place else. I mean, the rest of it, you're just stacking knowledge, but you get the basis in terms of how to walk in, how to read a room, how to find out, where everybody's at. It's interesting how much you can learn in a fraternity if you allow yourself to get caught up in it. It's an amazing experience.
Oh yeah, it's just like brother zero to brother hero. The more you put into it, the more you get out of it.
Exactly. Oftentimes too, when you get to our age, slightly more seasoned, we start to a little bit more. We start to think about some of the things that you wish you knew then that you know now. So if you were looking back to some of the undergrads at your school, and you could say, "This is what I wish I knew then," what would you share with them?
Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to take an initiative. The worst that someone can say is no. The worst that happens is it doesn't get done. But you've tried, you've attempted. And if you fail at it the first time, don't let that sidetrack you. You can go after it again. Through my career, there was a lot of times where I did not take no for an answer. I was able to work a way around to get a yes.
That's good feedback. So, Gary, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Is there anything else at all that you want to share with the audience?
Oh, yes, a few things, and then we can close up shop. I'd like to mention the books that I have out, and anybody would like to get them, they can get them through my website at garypowers.com. So this is Letters from a Soviet Prison, 85 of my dad's letters to and from his family, the journal he kept while incarcerated, primary source document. I thought it was very important to the historical record to have his written words, his hopes, his feelings, so that students and scholars, researchers could read what it was like to be in a Soviet prison back in the 60s. My second book that came out 2019 through a publisher, Spy Pilot, Francis Gary Powers, the U-2 Incident, and a Controversial Cold War Legacy. 30 years of research, 5 years to write it, sets the record straight. I actually talked about the SAE fraternity in this book because this is part of my life growing up and helping to set the record straight in regards to my father. Not only does it go over what my father went through, but it goes through how I dealt with it, how I coped with it, and how I was able to do so much research that the US government in 2000 awarded him the POW medal, and in 2012, the Silver Star. So this goes through the behind the scenes process as to how that happened. My latest book came out last year, 2022, Enemy Territory. This is a graphic novel. Kids today, not all of them like to read. So what better way to teach them about the U-2 incident and Cold War history than through a comic book, a graphic novel for a younger generation, a younger audience. And then finally, I'll share my screen one more time and just show a couple of web pages that people can visit if they'd like to see it. Okay, so if you'd like to reach me, I can be reached at garypowers.com. You can go over to the contact page, and that's where you can send me an email to say hello. I'm always looking for students to do interviews with for Cold War reports or on the U-2 incident. If they're looking for an introduction to somebody, I might be able to help facilitate that if they reach out to me. The other thing I want to mention is the Cold War Museum. As a result of my efforts to find out about my dad, I discovered that there were hundreds of thousands of other men and women who fought, sacrificed, some of which who died during this conflict, 46-year period of time between 1945 and 1991. I thought it was very important to honor our Cold War veterans. I also realized during my lectures around the country to schools that kids back in the 90s knew nothing about the Cold War. And even today, they don't know a lot about it. They often thought that the U-2 incident had something to do with the U-2 rock band. So I knew that I had to do something to honor veterans, preserve history, and educate kids. So in 1996, I founded the museum. I thought it was going to take 3 years to fundraise $3 million. Shouldn't be too hard. It took 15 years to get brick and mortar. And in that time period, we gathered up as many Cold War artifacts as we could. In the 90s and in early 2000s, very easy to find Cold War artifacts. Nearly impossible to find them today. So we were ahead of the curve when we founded the museum. So those are the two things I wanted to mention, garypowers.com as well as coldwar.org.
Wow, that's impressive. This has been truly enlightening, Gary. So thank you so much for spending time with us today. I'm sure that the people across the realm are really going to enjoy this. But again, thank you so much. This has been awesome.
All right, Steve, thank you very much. And if there are any chapters out there, or if there are any chapters who would like to do a fundraiser, invite me out, do a lecture at the campus. I'd be glad to do that. I'm always looking for lecture opportunities, venues across the country. This is how I make my living, lecturing, writing, and teaching. So thank you very much for the opportunity to join SAE Foundation on this interview. Phi Alpha to everybody out there.
Phi Alpha, thank you.